was the best questions. That was the best questions I've ever been asked.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Thank you.
This is a Blairing Out with Eric Blair show, and today we have the legend, the myth, the icon, Pauline Black of the Selector on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. That's very kind of you, if I may say.
Thank you for being on the show today. At what age did you discover that you were adopted?
4.
Your adoptive parents told you?
Yeah, my mother kind of had to tell me, really, because, I mean, I was adopted into a white family, so I had a white dad and a white mum and white brothers. By the time I was about to go to school, they knew that the thorny question might come up. So, yeah, she told me.
So how did your adoptive parents shape you as a person?
Probably not very much at all in that way. I don't know, is it nature, is it nurture? I have absolutely no idea. All I can say is that my parents, and I love both of them, held fairly traditional racist attitudes of other white working class families in Britain at that time. You've got to remember this in the 50s and the 60s. And so I grew up against a backdrop of that. It was just one of those kind of tricky situations where they didn't really think much of black people at all, but they had an adopted black daughter. They didn't really think, you know what I mean, that provided no contradiction for them, and quite how they lived with that contradiction I don't know, but it provided no contradiction for them.
Were they spiritual people?
No. Well, what do you mean? Did they believe?
Were they secular or were they Christians?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, is anybody? I mean, I believe my mother was probably a Baptist. I don't think my dad bothered that much.
But you didn't see that evident in their behavior?
I don't really know what a Baptist does, and I have absolutely no idea what somebody of Church of England does particularly. I had an auntie who was in the Salvation Army. I thought they were quite good, actually, until they used to have a sort of pageant every year when I was quite young, and they rather insisted that I wear a grass skirt and a bone through my nose, one of their children's pageant things, because I was a bit of a novelty. They didn't have any other black children that came along to it, so my elderly auntie used to take me to it, and I just put my foot down at a very early age and said, no way.
So what was your reaction to the fact that your biological father was a Yoruba prince and that your biological mother was Jewish?
Well, I mean, you have to remember that sort of Nigerian princes are not in short supply. There's quite a lot of them. I was more interested in the fact that he was from the Yoruba tribe because, you could either be from Hausa Fulani or you could be from the Yoruba tribe or you could be Igbo, and I'd always wondered which one that I was. I'd always known that my dad was Nigerian. But I didn't find all this out until I was 42. And when you're 42, you're fairly fully formed, aren't you? I mean, nothing much comes as a surprise. A few things came as a surprise. My mother being Jewish came as a big surprise, actually. But I was really happy about that. I thought that was great. It's I always knew that my mother's real name was Eileen Magnus, and she'd met my father when she was 17. And she used to work in the typing pool at the Foreign Office in London. And any visiting kind of, people of some kind of dignitary status from outside of Britain, i.e., anyone from Africa, really, used to be invited along to sort of parties where they'd have tea and cakes and things. And so the young girls from the typing pool were kind of used to, I don't know, give them tea and cakes. I mean, sounds like pimping to me, but anyway. That's what happened, and my dad took rather a shine to my mum, and I can understand why, because she was a really good-looking woman, and so yeah, I mean, I was kind of the progeny of a one-night stand. Finding that out and then actually going in search of my parents did change me in that respect, and certainly was one of the motivations when I was going to do my autobiography to think about it as more than just the life plan that I'd ended up in music and some anecdotal nonsense about being in a band, which, I mean, let's face it, everybody does, I mean, it's kind of everyone goes this sort of sex, drugs, rock and roll old kind of route, and we've all done that, and you're usually done with it by about 25, aren't you? Or it's done with you.
Yeah.
So, and I thought that would be very tedious and very boring, and I mean, I didn't really have that many stories anyway. So I tried to put what I had learned from being within the two-tone movement, the whole kind of, anti-racist, anti-sexist stance, into a kind of a life arc of how you began thinking about oneself as a mixed race person and how you fitted into society, which is pretty much kind of, black or white, isn't it? And all the gradations in between, obviously, both sexually and, and in terms of how you might racially identify yourself. So that kind of led me in this huge arc to finding out that my mother, with her Magnus name, who I thought was possibly from Norway or somewhere like that, and all a bit Nordic, was actually a Jewish family that were in the East End of London, and they ran betting shops. Yeah, that was a revelation. Yeah.
What did working for the National Health Service as a radiographer teach you about humanity?
Well, I think anyone who works in any kind of public service, particularly within the National Health Service at home, you don't do it for the money, that's for sure. You do it because you genuinely, I guess, as maybe cliche as it sounds, kind of want to help people and be interested in people. And if people have horrible diseases in some way, help them through that. Nurses are far more at the sharp end than any radiographer is.
How did you discover you could sing?
I'm not sure I ever discovered I could sing. I didn't start out to sing. I just thought that I could sing better than somebody I heard one time. And I thought, I could do that. And so I went home and I found a Leonard Cohen songbook, which had been kicking around the house for years. My husband's old acoustic guitar, that he was going to learn the Leonard Cohen songs but never did, and teach himself to play the guitar. And I kind of picked that up in a week. And I thought, 3 chords are good enough for Dylan, that's good enough for me. And so I trotted back down to this place where I'd heard this person sing and sang my ditties, and nobody asked me to leave. So I thought that was an invitation to maybe something else.
Why were rock stars Grace Jones and Mick Jagger important to your early worldview and musical inspiration?
I wouldn't necessarily say that Grace Jones is a phenomenon, if you kind of see what I mean. So I'm in no way, shape or form would necessarily consider her as any role model for myself. Jagger, yeah. I had a crush on Jagger from about the age of 11. It was just he did that kind of weird thing of living on that cusp of male-female thing, and that was the most interesting thing about him. And he had this phenomenal voice, and he was just all energy on a stage. So I just kind of took that as a blueprint. I thought that was maybe the best way to be, so I thought, well, I'll have some of that. There were other black women who I was incredibly impressed by. One of those would be Billie Holiday, which I had played on the London stage, and also, people like Joan Armatrading were around at the time I was doing things, but I was also interested in Polystyrene of X-Ray Specs, who was a couple of years precursor to what I did in the Selector, and I found her very entertaining and very individual. That's what I look for in female performers, is individuality rather than anything else.
So what were the circumstances that led to the Selector?
I was putting together a band, and in that band was Charles H. Brembridge, but at that time he was kind of playing bass and keys. He wasn't drumming like he would go on to do in the Selector. And Silverton Hutchinson, who had been the drummer in the Specials prior to John Bradbury taking over. He was kind of floating free and sort of had drifted into the band. And there was myself and a guy called Lawton Brown, who was on rhythm guitar. And we were just rehearsing, I guess. And Linville Golding, the rhythm guitarist of the Specials, came down to the rehearsal space that we were in, and Desmond Brown, the keyboard player who would go on to be in the Selector, he was there too, and Linville had just come off tour with the Specials, and they were supporting the Clash. So in Coventry, like, that was a big cheese, do you know what I mean? And he kind of had this aura about him of, I've done something really good. And he listened to us for a while, and he sort of pointed at myself, and he pointed at Desmond, and he pointed at Charles Bembridge, and sort of said, I think you should come and see this guy that I know, Neil Davis. Go around to Charlie Anderson's house, and he gave us the address, and I went round there, and Neil was sat on the sofa, exactly the same as we are now, with his wife, Jane Davis, and it was Charlie Anderson's house, who would become the bass player in the Selector, and everybody was there who would then go on to be in the Selector, except one, and that was Gaps Hendrickson, who I work with now, and someone had to go out and find him. And he came around, he came through the door, and I thought, yeah, he looks good, yeah. And looked around the room, and I thought, what a stunning bunch of people. And that was it, really. So we thought, well, we'll get together and see what comes up. So I went down to where they rehearsed, and they said, do you know any songs? And I said, well, I got this song, it's called They Make Me Mad, it's blah blah blah, it's in this key, and if you fancy it. And we kind of jammed around it for about, I don't know, half an hour or whatever, and again, no one asked me to leave.
I know you didn't write the lyrics, but what inspired the song 3 Minute Hero?
I do know what inspired that song. I think Neil Davis worked for at a place called Lucas Aerospace, and I don't think he liked working very much. I think there was only him and Gaps Hendrickson and myself who actually did hold down jobs for any length of time in those days, and he just had a really, really rubbish day, and it was really, really fed up. And it was 3 Minute Hero actually means that it's what you aspire to. Records, black vinyl records in those days, singles used to last for 3 minutes on the radio. If they were any longer than 3 minutes, then the DJ talked over them or faded them out. So there was no point in sort of, you got everything into that 3 minutes. And so that was it. That's what you aspired to. If you wanted to get out of this kind of, workaholic, humdrum sort of life, then that was the way out of it if you were a musician. And he fully embraced that.
How did you mentally and emotionally embrace the top 40 success of the Selector?
Well, you don't really, because, at the time, you don't know you're successful. You know that things are happening, but things with us happen so fast that there wasn't really time to process it in the same way as, you can look at a trajectory of a year and say, yeah, well, we started off here and we got to here. It was just like one thing after another. It was like, hey, do you want to go to America? Whoa, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And you just got on and did it. And it was like, as long as you were doing things, presumably you were successful.
And would you say that it was healthy anarchy?
I don't think anarchy is ever healthy.
What is your definition of anarchy then?
No rules.
And you believe in rules?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I don't necessarily believe in rules, but I do believe in discipline, self-discipline. Ooh, that makes me sound weird, doesn't it?
What were some highlights of that ride?
Well, the ride was bumpy. I definitely have my seatbelt on. I don't know. I just take things as they come. It's all been interesting. I've tried a lot of different things. I've tried theatre, acting, presenting, writing music, all different kinds of things, writing a book. It's if it presents itself and I think I can do it, I'll have a go. What else can you do, really? And that's the way I look at things. I don't look at things as because, once you start reminiscing and saying, oh, that was so great in such and such a time, that means it's never going to be that great again. And I think, well, maybe it might be.
So Rolling Stone magazine said, hands down, Pauline Black possessed the best voice that ever graced a two-tone release.
Yeah.
And that didn't go to your head?
No, not really. No, well, why would it? I knew it to be true anyway, so it wouldn't go to my head, would it? If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, then it's not true, is it? Yeah, and it's an arguable thing, and it's subjective. That's what he thought. But I wasn't going to argue with him, would you? then.
You sound like you were very humble on the entire ride and still are. Is that true?
I wouldn't say I was any more humble than I don't really know what humble means. I mean, we live in this new age, don't we, of social media where everyone's supposed to be humble and terribly, oh yes, oh no, I couldn't possibly. Hell with that. To get out on a stage, you've got to think that you're good. Otherwise, you're just going to be like nothing, are you? Mm-hmm. And I've been in this business long enough to know that whatever charisma I do have or whatever talent I do have must have some kind of, status in some people's minds. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it 40 years later, would you? I'd be scrubbing floors somewhere. Not that there's anything wrong with scrubbing floors. I scrub my own.
And singing on American Idol is not the be-all, end-all.
Karaoke nonsense that we are beset with these days. I just find that absolutely horrifying, And why on earth you should be kind of famous for being famous' sake, no, that I don't understand at all.
What stands out to you about the new musical News shoot by Michael Putland with the punk rock stars Susie Sue of Susie and the Banshees, the Slits Viv Albertine, Blondie's Debbie Harry, Polystyrene of the X-Ray Specs, and Chrissy Hynde of the Pretenders?
Well, Debbie Harry says that she arranged a tea party for all us ladies, to which she arrived late. But she doesn't quite describe it like that. Maybe she did, I don't know. I mean, all I know is that we were contacted to go down and do this photo shoot, and I got down there, and I'd met Chrissy Hynde before anyway, and because she was kind of a contemporary of ours, I knew the Slits vaguely, sort of thing, so I knew Viv. I'd always wanted to meet Polly. She was the one there that I most wanted to meet. Everybody else was kind of a bit blonde or a bit sort of dark, do you know what I mean, in some kind of satanic way. So yeah, I was really, really pleased that we did that, because I adored Polly. I thought she was lovely. She was lovely at that shoot. And also I adored Debbie Harry, because she had invited the Selector to support Blondie at Hammersmith Odeon and somewhere else as well. We did one time, and also they covered one of our songs, Danger, on the first album, which you can't get much more of an accolade than that, can you? So yeah, I was pleased.
Why do you think your second Selector album, Celebrate the Bullet, did not share the same success as your first album, Too Much Pressure?
Mainly because I think that it was way ahead of its time. People didn't really understand. They wanted more of what they saw as ska fun, and you wouldn't necessarily say it was the most fun album in the world, kind of thing. And also, people aren't very good at irony. And Celebrate the Bullet obviously is an ironic song. I mean, it's a song which is an anti-violence song, the use of bullets to sort out our arguments. And if you look at it in the fullness of time, I think we had a point. And also it's a brilliant piece of music, quite apart from anything else, and the sentiment of the song is very good. But the unfortunate thing about it was when that album came out, John Lennon had just been shot. And also a few months later, President Reagan was shot, and nobody was interested in playing it because irony doesn't really play well on the radio, if you kind of see what I mean. Not without someone who actually gets behind it and can explain it to people.
Do you believe that people kill people or that guns kill people?
I believe that guns kill people.
Chrysalis Records in maintaining your career.
Two Tone was really an imprint of Chrysalis. I mean, it was owned by Chrysalis, it was funded by Chrysalis, and we had a fairly unique way of going on, which meant that any of the bands, or well, Jerry Dammers, i.e. the founding father of all things Two Tone, who actually negotiated the contract, if he liked a band, he had the facility to sign them to a deal, which was you got £1,000 to go in and record 3 songs. And out of those 3 songs, they would choose a single, an A and a B side, and that would get put out. And that would get put out on the Two Tone label with all its kind of requisite iconography, black and white iconography. And that led to a lot of success. I mean, you know, for us, for Madness, for The Beat, for the Body Snatchers, and there were lots of other bands, the Apollinaires, the Higsons, all that came afterwards as well. We were the only band to record an album of the ska fraternity anyway. In the early days, the two-tone days, we were the only ones to record an album, which was the Too Much Pressure album. And I'm very proud of that fact, because all the others kind of did one single and then jumped ship to, the lure of the filthy lucre.
Yeah, I talked to Dave Wakeling.
He sees that as a feather in his cap, that he wasn't dumb enough to hang around. Well...
He wanted to make sure they didn't own the copyrights to his stuff.
Well, yes, I mean, I can understand it from his point of view, yes. Some people worry about these things a little bit more than others, don't they? But in the end, in the fullness of time, really, copyrights run out, don't they?
Yeah, I know. It hasn't really helped me much.
Me neither.
So there is no real justice.
No, there is no real justice, and what a contract's worth. Not really worth the paper they're written on, are they? Unless someone is making you an offer that you can't refuse. Yeah. And then if it's a question of my brains being on it or not, then I think I will take the pen and sign it. Yeah.
Do you think that multiculturalism is the cure to the world's problems?
No, I think miscegenation is the cure to the world's problems. And out of that, of course, will come multiculturalism. I think that multiculturalism is the way. I also think that, people just need to wake up and just think that we're all human beings, and this planet has been given to us. We're the ones who can either make something good of it or just completely destroy it. Unfortunately, we seem to be more hell-bent on the latter than we do on the former.
What do you think about the Sex Pistols' John Lydon coming out in support of Trump, Brexit, and Nigel Farage?
Man's an idiot.
Can you define that?
Can I define idiot? Well, 5 years ago, we were invited to support them on some dates in Britain. And I thought, well, he's done a butter advert. He's been on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. How bad can this be? But, I have a fond memory of John Lydon, and that memory was in Hammersmith Palais in London in about 1979, I think, probably on the two-tone tour, of just bumping into him after we had played, and he was sort of standing around with that kind of wild-eyed stare that he has, sort of stroking his chin, and vaguely nodded at me as I passed, and I thought, well, okay, well, if I'm in on his radar, I thought the Sex Pistols were great myself, I thought, well, that's okay, that will do. And then, 35 years went by, and we seemed to be on his radar again, but this time we didn't see him until the last night, do you know what I mean? When he was there with his wife in her twin set and her pearls and her cigarette holder, and I just thought, what a pretentious pair. But he is very clever. He is very, very clever man, but I think he's stupid. But he's stupid, Kanye West is stupid. What are they on? What do they take? How can you be that stupid? We have that stupid lot, the Spice Girls at the moment, pontificating on about, it's all people's power now, not girls' power, and we should all follow, Theresa May, an arch-conservative kind of despot who wants to bring about Brexit, which I think is one of the most stupid things that the British people are ever going to do, but they seem firmly intent on shooting themselves in the foot. Why one wants to be prized away from Europe when we have had, how many years? An awful lot of years with no wars, nothing like that, do you know what I mean? In terms of what the World War II meant, or World War I, I would have thought that it was much more in our interest to stay aligned with them than to go off on this rubbish nationalist sort of course that we seem to be taking along with your country as well. Next thing, there'll be a wall up the English Channel.
The Spice Girls supporting this person, that person. Don't you feel that they're all just puppets?
Absolutely, they're puppets. You do definitely get the feeling that a hand has been inserted somewhere and is manipulating their mouths. But hey, ever thus, really, when you think about it, it's always been that way. But you can choose who you associate yourself with. I would never, ever, and I'm damn sure they wouldn't want to associate themselves with me, so it's all good, isn't it?
How do you think your latest album, Daylight, differs from your past work?
It doesn't differ. I mean, it's a progression. We're a band. We're the Selector. The Selector has a sound. The Selector deals with various topics, the way we see life. I mean, every band has a skewed vision, I suppose, of what life, what their concerns are about, and all of those kind of things. And that's what we do. I mean, that's our vision of how we see the world at the moment.
Highlights of performing with Damon Albarn on the Gorillaz Humans Tour 2017-2018.
Well, that was pretty weird. Probably 18 months before, I had a phone call from Damon's manager saying, Damon's got this track and he thinks that you'd sound really good on it. So I thought, well, okay. So he'd like you to come down to the studio. So you go down to the studio, Damon's studio, and he's got this incredible work ethic because he works from 9 to 5 in his studio, and everything's terribly healthy, and and his it's good. It's an experience, put it that way. It's a very manly experience, it's a boys' club. So when you enter into that, you kind of think, oh, okay. And yeah, this track came together, Charger. And then that track got taken over to, initially, I believe, and I'm not really sure whether I should say, but it was supposed to be me, maybe Grace Jones, and maybe Mavis Staple on it. Okay, they all ended up on different tracks and things like this, but I'm told that he took it over, and Grace listened to it for a while and then said, yes, and what she really meant was, there's only me should be on that track. So she did her version and I had my version, and I ended up on the super deluxe vinyl, something or other, sort of, which it was a vinyl and of all the tracks that were on the album, and she was on one side and I was on the other side, basically. So, but I don't think she wanted to tour with Damon. Or I don't know, maybe Damon didn't want her to tour with him, I don't know. But anyway, I got the call, and would I like to go to Birmingham Arena in Britain, and would I like to go to the O2 Arena in London and do 2 nights with him, which meant that I was probably going to play to more people than I would in a year period that we would do. So it would have been churlish of me to say no, so I said yes, and it was great fun. And then I got another call sort of after Christmas. Hey, would you like to come and do South America with us? So what's not to like? Yeah. I want to go to Colombia, I want to go to Chile, I want to go to all these places, to Brazil and everything. So I did that with him, and it was just a riot, and it was real fun. Yeah, and he's great to be on stage with because he wants you to perform. I mean, he's right there in your face, just screaming at you, and you either take that on board or you run a mile, kind of thing. And I found it a very invigorating experience.
The Blairing Out Show.